Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to, I guess, what is going to be our classroom, at least here for about the first week-ish. Hopefully I can actually get back to seeing all of your faces here soon. So I've got a little situation, if you watch my intro video, that I'm not going to be actually in school the next couple of days. I'm going to be at home being dad because my kids are not allowed to go to daycare because of a COVID exposure, but you all don't want to hear my little story here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to videotape my lesson, or I should say like screencastify my lesson to let you know what it is that we're doing here this first day. All right. So every day, this is for both my government and world studies classes. All right. I'm going to have an agenda up on the board, something like this. This is just a little bit of like, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish today. And really, this first week, what we're going to hit hard is being able to do what's called evaluate online information. All right. So I've got an activity today where you're going to start to evaluate some online information about masks and COVID-19. All right. And obviously for this first week, really what you're going to need is you're going to need like your MacBook. You're going to need to be able to get on the Google Classroom and use some headphones. So just so you know, if you struggle with any of this, feel free to email me any questions, comments, or concerns you have. I will be like near my computer and be able to email you. It's just I might have like my son or daughter that are near me and I might need to be taking care of them. But today, really what we're going to look at today is one question. By the end of class today, what I want you to be able to answer is one main question. That is, what makes something a credible source of information, it should say, online? So what makes something a credible source of information online? Because in today's day, I mean, you all are doing pretty much online learning right now. We know that we get so much information online, it's not even funny. Whether it's like all of these different websites, you probably get a whole bunch of information through like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, just like Google searches. That's where we get a lot of our information is online. So when we look at information online, we can't just look at information and say, oh, like all information online is good information. We need to ask ourselves, what makes a credible source of information? And what credible means is credible. If a source is credible, you just know that the information that they are saying is trustworthy. So you can trust that this source is telling the truth if they are credible. All right. Because a lot of times, like, you all have seen this. There's news and there's information that gets pushed out there that isn't necessarily real. It is kind of like made up and it's not the truth. So we've got to try to figure out what makes trustworthy information online. All right. And in order to figure out if an online source is credible, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look into the background of who wrote that source. And there's really like two big questions that you have to answer with that. The first is, what is the creator's authority on the subject? All right. And I'm going to get into that here a little bit. And then what is the creator's perspective on the subject? Those are kind of like question number one here and question number two. Those are the two big questions. There's some smaller questions with that. All right. All right, so let's say that you are doing some research and you want to know, and I'm going to pick kind of a controversial topic to get you sucked in here. You want to know if the U.S. should legalize marijuana use for all citizens. So you're going to do a little bit of research, and let's say that you come across a couple of articles, some links that I'm going to show you here, and you're going to determine if these sources are credible. Well, the first thing you're going to have to figure out, if you're figuring out if a source is credible, is what's the author's authority on the subject. And what authority means is essentially asking the question, does this author have any sort of background that would make them an expert in this subject? All right. So like a lot of times if we're looking at, especially things with like going on with COVID right now, some good authorities on the subject are probably going to be like doctors. All right. Sometimes we can get into like when we talk about history, some good ones are like professors, people that study history are good authorities on the subject, people that are experts. Like me, for example, I'm not an expert on COVID-19 because I'm not a doctor. I don't have experience. I haven't studied what COVID-19 like does to the body, how it spread, stuff like that. I am not an expert. All right. So let's take this first example. All right, we're going to take an example right here. Let's say that you're trying to figure out, all right, back here, should the United States legalize marijuana? All right. And let's say that the first example that you come up with is right here. You find an online article that says something about this. All right. And it says like the financial cost of having marijuana. Of legalizing marijuana. And if we look here, the first thing you're going to want to do when looking before you even read the website is you're going to want to know who is the creator of this information. So if we go to this, most of the time the creator of information is going to be up at the top here somewhere, maybe even down below. But this article right here has absolutely nobody that they say has created this information. So here in this first example, what's the author's authority on the subject? There is no stated author, so we can't know if the author has expertise or not. This article right here is probably not going to be credible just because there is no author of this article. So that's going to be the first thing you look for. So that's kind of the first example. That's not a good sign when an article doesn't have an author. All right. But let's look at the second example here. Let's say you're doing the same thing, wanting to know if marijuana should be legalized, and you run into an article on the website Slate. All right. Talking about cannabis addiction is not heroin addiction. That doesn't make it any less real. So now if we take a look up here, we actually have, it says right here, an author. And if you scroll over this author's name, you can actually get a little bit of background on this author. So now it takes us to the website and it says that Jonathan N. Stea is a registered and practicing clinical psychologist in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, with research and clinical expertise in addiction. So if we go back here and we're kind of filling in these questions, who's the creator of this information? Well, it's this guy by the name of Jonathan N. Stea. All right. Does he have expertise on the subject? Yeah. It says that he's a registered and practicing clinical psychologist and he has expertise in addiction. So that would make him, if he's got expertise in this field, that would make him a much more authority than the first example that doesn't even give an author. So in addition to just figuring out kind of who the author is and if they have expertise, the second question we have to ask ourselves is, what's the creator's perspective on this subject? And what perspective just means is, how does the author look at this subject? Does the author have any ideas about this subject that would cause them to be more trustworthy or less trustworthy? All right. So if we look here, a perspective is, let's say, this picture right here. From one perspective, you can look at this and you can see a duck. Like, here's the eye of the duck, here's the head of the duck, here is the beak. Another perspective you can look at, you could say, no, this is actually a rabbit, where you've got the eye of the rabbit, the ears of the rabbit, the neck of the rabbit, the nose of the rabbit. It kind of depends on how you look at it. Or this one right here. On this side, it looks like there's 4 sticks. On this side, the way this person's looking at it, it looks like there's 3. So that's kind of what perspective is. How does this author look at this subject? So let's go back to our examples here. All right, we're going to do the same thing. Now we got to look at what's the author's perspective on this subject. All right, so if we look at this and what we're looking for is kind of what's the website this is found, and does the website that would have a perspective that would make it more or less trustworthy. So we're looking more at the website in general. So let's take a look at this first example right here. So remember, we're looking at, should marijuana be legalized in the United States? And if we look here, right, this website, we see that this website looks like calmca.org. I might not know anything about this. So what I'm going to do is, a lot of times up here, they've got the main website link. I'm going to go back to the main page of this website. And what you're going to find is that this website is called Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana. All right. So if this website is all about Citizens Against Legalizing Marijuana, they obviously have a bias. They have a perspective that they're only going to put out information that shows how bad marijuana happens to be. Whether or not that's truthful or not, this website doesn't have any incentive to post anything that might suggest that marijuana has benefits. So what I would find is this website that has this information is calm.org right here. And then answering the question, does this website have a perspective that would make it more or less trustworthy? Absolutely, this website does. It's a website that's against the legalization of marijuana. So it's got a perspective that would make it less trustworthy because they're not necessarily going to post just the truth. They're going to only post what they want to post about how marijuana is not good for people. Now, moving on to the second example, I want to give you a quick second example. Let's say that we are looking at this article that's about cannabis addiction is not heroin addiction. That doesn't make it any less real. This one is this one's on the website Slate. So what I need to do here is I need to take a look at what exactly is Slate. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click right here on Slate. A lot of times it's just going to bring you to the main homepage. And if you can't find a whole lot on the homepage, another good place to go is down here all the way to the bottom of websites. A lot of times they'll have a place that says About Us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click on the About Us section. All right. And then it's just going to give you a little bit of background. All right. So it's going to say something, and here's some good things to look for. All right. Its take on current events have been recognized with numerous awards, including National Magazine Award for Excellence Online. It sounds like if you have an award for excellence online, it sounds like this is a pretty legit website. All right. So we're taking a look. It doesn't look like it necessarily has any bias or any perspective that would make it more or less trustworthy. So here I would say something like Slate.com doesn't really have a perspective that would make it more or less trustworthy. They have won awards for being solid online news site, so that's good for them. So now if we just take a look in general about these two websites, okay? The first one here was the website that was from the Calm CA, the Citizens Against the Legalization of Marijuana. I would say this article is not credible because it's not trustworthy because there's no stated author. You don't know who wrote this. You don't know if this person was a doctor that wrote it, if it was just some random person that wrote it. So I would say that would make it not very trustworthy. Also, it's on a website against the legalization of marijuana. So they have their own reason to only use evidence that supports their position. However, this second website, this one that was all about the Slate article, that one is going to be a little bit more reliable because, hey, this one is written on a website that is pretty darn credible. The article is also written by a doctor, so he obviously knows what he's talking about when it comes to marijuana use. All right, so with that being said, that's kind of my examples that I've given you. What your job is now is I want you to imagine that you're researching to see how effective masks truly are at stopping the spread of COVID-19. So what you're going to do is you're going to get on to this Google Doc that I have given you. All right, and I'm going to give you a little video direction in here. So this Google Doc, you are going to look at 5 different links to different articles, and what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to fill out this chart based on those questions that I asked you to try to figure out, do you think that these different links are credible sources of information about wearing masks in the time of COVID-19? So you can go ahead and get onto that Google Doc, and you should be good to go.